Story 1. Every week in October, my friends and I used to get together to tell ghost stories. Last fall, they started coming true. I was running late, and it was my turn to tell a story. That made it worse. It was cold for October, and would get even colder after the sun finished setting. Falling leaves kept whipping around my bike, occasionally hitting me in the face. I almost ate a few. Halfway to the spot, I stopped to turn on the flashlight taped to the handlebars. The light was slim and shaky, but good enough to navigate the dirt road that ran back to Meadow House. Lex and JD were sitting on the crumbling wall around the mansion, smoking, when I pulled up. "Hey, look who decided to show up," JD said, tossing his cigarette into the gravel drive. "Mom wouldn't let me leave until I finished my English paper," I said, walking my bike over to the others, where they were leaning against a sturdier section of wall. "Where are Tone and Eddie-O?" Lex hopped off the wall and zipped her jacket up against the wind. "Ed's starting the fire, and Tone's working on the food. Did you bring it?" I nodded and pulled a bottle of wine from my backpack. "Just one?" JD asked. The cabinet was low. I guess my mom hadn't restocked in a while. If I pulled more than one, she'd probably notice. Lex examined the label. "Is it any good?" "I have absolutely no idea." JD slid off the wall, smooth as water down a drain. He plucked the wine bottle from Lex's hands, turning it from side to side. JD tapped the glass. "Sounds good," he said. "Sounds red. Besides, Eddie smuggled some beers out from his place." The three of us walked through the broken gate, each of us touching the left post with the 4 deep scratches. It was our little ritual, a reminder of when we first started our campfire stories. Meadow House must have been beautiful once. It was massive, taking up several acres a few miles outside of town. It had a dozen rooms, a garden, and even a fountain in the courtyard. What Meadow House lacked was a roof. I mean, it still had bits and pieces, clinging to the frame like scraps of clothing on a river-washed corpse, but the place was essentially a wreck. Holes pitted the walls, and all of the window glass had long since shattered from storms or stones. Kids used to come out to Meadow back in my parents' time when they felt an urge to break or burn or just wanted some private space. My dad told me about it, but the cops put a stop to that when the house started to attract drug dealers. For a long time, Meadow House was left to rot. Then we found her. If there's a better place on earth to tell a ghost story, I've never seen it. I could smell the fire Eddie-O was building before I saw it. It was a perfect October smell, smoky and strong, dry wood cracking. Eddie always liked using old wood from deep in the forest around Meadow House. He'd show up early before the rest of us to start gathering. We usually set up in the garden just outside of the house. Occasionally we banked a fire over the stones in the courtyard. That required us to walk through the mansion, though, so it had to be a special occasion. While we loved using Meadow's grounds to tell stories, the house itself was deeply unpleasant. There was an odor in the house, mildew and bad air and other dying things. You felt like you were being watched any time you were inside the walls. Not just watched, but followed. Meadow House was a shell of what it used to be, but something seemed to linger. "Look who decided to show up," Ed said when we walked over. Yeah, JD already said the same thing. Ed had set up the fire in the corner on some open ground ringed by faded patio stones. The flames were already licking 2 or 3 feet up from the pit. There were still a few ounces of sunshine left in the day, but the edges were getting dark, with purple smears on the horizon. I moved closer to the fire. I should have worn a thicker jacket, but I'd just gotten a red windbreaker that looked a lot like the one James Dean wore in Rebel Without a Cause. I knew Tone loved old movies like that, so I figured she might like the jacket. Tone was sitting on a big red cooler, heel tapping on a stone path, sipping Coke out of a glass bottle from a straw. She'd set up a small card table next to the cooler with hot dogs and chips, Esmore stuff, assorted snacks. There was a pile of sticks under the stable, so we could spear the dogs and marshmallows and cook them over the fire. "The buffet is open," Tone said, hopping off the cooler. "First come, first serve." She reached into the cooler, pulled out another Coke, and sent it sailing my way. "Don't open it yet, Chris," Tone warned. It's gonna be shook up. We all gathered around the fire as soon as the sun was finally and fully sunk. It was freezing everywhere outside of the ring of light, but God, it was nice huddled up to the flame. I cleared my throat. Everyone was watching me, waiting for my story. Have you heard the story of the sledgehammer slaughter? I asked, launching into the tale. They found the first body smashed to pieces on the riverbank. Every bone was broken. Skull a shattered dish with bits of purple-gray brains leaking out. According to the medical examiner, the cause of death was blunt force trauma from a sledgehammer. Detective Rourke was, how could they know that the wounds were from a sledgehammer and not, like, a baseball bat? J.D. interrupted. The shape of the blows, duh. Tone answered. Now shut up and let him finish. I smiled and continued. They hung on every word. I was really proud of the story. I spent all week working on it. Half an hour later, it was over. Everyone sat blinking like we'd woken up from a collective dream or nightmare. After cleaning up and packing up, we all went our separate ways. I almost worked up the courage to ask Tone if I could walk her home. Next week, I promised myself. She did compliment me on my jacket, at least. I went home and immediately fell asleep. When I woke up, there were police and ambulances all over my street. My neighbors were murdered in the night. I stood at the living room window looking out, shaking. I didn't know the details at the time, but the way the cops darted around, their faces, and the sound of someone yelling out of view, it all put this lump of dread deep in my stomach. I knew something terrible had happened, and maybe was still happening. The kind of awful that could reach out later and snatch me up if I wasn't careful. I didn't sleep the rest of the night, and on Monday at school, I found out what happened to my neighbors. The entire family of 4 was beaten to death, smashed to pieces just like in my story. We debated whether we should skip campfire stories the next Friday, but that would mean breaking our tradition of telling a tale every week in October. That tradition had stood for nearly 3 years, so we ultimately decided to go ahead with it. The week after the murders was Eddie's turn. Have you heard the story of the ravenous ticks? He asked. Eddie's story was terrifying, but more than that, nauseating. Ticks the size of house cats that moved terribly fast. Victims walking around with the things hanging from them like swollen blood balloons. Lex actually threw up. Scrambling off the log she was sitting on to go puke in the garden. It was a good story if gross. Once we were done, I took a deep breath, walked over to Tone, and asked her if I could walk her home. She thanked me, but told me she had to bike home so she could be back by curfew. I walked to Meadow House that night, so I couldn't keep up. No worries, I said, smiling, praying for the ground to open up to swallow me whole. Sorry, Mom would kill me if I'm as late as last week. Would you like to meet me in Stevens Park tomorrow morning, though? Just to hang out? Tone asked. Yeah, see you then. I practically floated all of the way home. My good mood ended when I met Tone at the park the next day. Did you hear about Father Gunsel over at First Methodist? She asked as I joined her on a bench near the park gate. No, my family isn't really the church type. Tone leaned in close enough for me to smell the strawberry shampoo she must have used that morning. They found the priest dead in his house last night, she whispered, drained of all of his blood. Jesus. Remind you of anything? Tone asked. Tick, tick, tick. I felt a chill despite the sunny skies. Eddie's story. Weird, isn't it? That poor family last week after your tale. Now a guy bled dry. You don't think I had anything to do with it, right? She flicked my shoulder. Of course not. No way. But it's too much to be a coincidence, Chris. I glanced around the park, the chill getting worse. The trees around us were covered in red and orange leaves, full-on autumn arrested. They reminded me of the campfire we gathered around each Friday. You don't think Lex or J.D. or Eddie? I began. Tone bit her perfect bottom lip and shook her head. I don't think so. I don't know. She hesitated. Do you want to hear my theory? I do. It's the house. There's something wrong there. I always feel like something is watching us while we're there. I think... Okay, I know this sounds nuts, but I think there's a presence in Meadow House feeding off our visits, and has been for years. Slowly, but now it's getting stronger. I didn't answer for a bit. turning over the idea in my mind. It was crazy, but I'd also been feeling a rising unease with every visit to the house. I mean, we only go there 4 nights a year, I said. Even in 3 years, that's only a couple of collective hours. Maybe that's enough. Tone stuck out her tongue. Look, it's just my theory. I held up my hands. It's a good theory. How do we test it without getting more people killed? I guess we could skip the campfire next week. No. If I'm right and there's something brewing at Meadow House, it might already be too late to stop it. We should keep an eye on it. I think our next campfire should be inside the house, so we can observe any weirdness. I asked, a little lick of terror climbing my throat. Tone nodded. From the house, or from the group. The deaths being like the stories, Chris, there's a connection. I'm sure of it. She stood up. Since we're in a secret society now with a mission dash, we are. Absolutely. Anyway, now that we're in the secret society, we need to have an initiation. Yeah, what is it? Tone stood up and grabbed my hand. You buy me ice cream. I wish I'd known then how our trip was going to end. I would have run and never looked back. Story 2. After hours at a carnival, wish I just stayed home. Every year my town hosts a carnival. It's a big deal. Carousels, fair games, Hall of Mirrors, and that stupid twilly swing ride that makes you want to vomit. They really pull out all the stops for this one weekend in October. Growing up, I would get sugar sick, as my mom liked to call it, from all the cotton candy and funnel cakes. I'd only feel the symptoms after the night was done. While lying in bed, clutching my prizes, I ignored the malaise and played back all the festivities in my head. I skip the carnival now. It doesn't do anything for me anymore. So imagine my dismay as my girlfriend, who helps work the carnival, dragged me along one night after all the crowds had left. No lines, she squealed. I even know how to turn on the Ferris wheel. I try to look excited. She yanked me over to the shooting gallery, and we sat down in front of a counter lined with water pistols. Several bullseye targets hung about 15 feet away. We fired away, but of course I let her win. I jumped the counter and make my way over to the prize rack. Huge stuffed animals, baseball caps, and t-shirts lined the wall. Which one do you want? I yelled back. She tried to look like she was making a life-altering decision. I'll admit now it was kind of cute. Before choosing, I see her whip out her cell phone and snap a picture of me next to the prizes. I'm stuck between picking you or the stuffed octopus next to the clown head doll. I'll take the octopus. I rolled my eyes and reached past the clown head doll for the octopus. From there, she pulled me over to the carousel. I watched her disappear into the engineer's control room, and a few seconds later the pipe organ started and the carousel cranked into motion. During the ride, she felt it was time for another picture. I really tried to smile. We only stayed in the Hall of Mirrors for few minutes. It was pitch black in there. We kept bumping into the mirrors and each other. Of course, she snapped a picture in there too. The blinding flash didn't help our disorientation. After the terrifying Hall of Mirrors situation, we decided to leave. She told me she was going to go home and post pictures of the great night. The next morning I got on Facebook and noticed the small album she uploaded. I started reading through the comments. Lucky bastards. Carnival all to yourself nice. What struck me off guard were the next comments. Love the photobombing clown. Who is that dressed up as the clown? Wait, what? I looked through the pictures again, and sure enough there it is. In the carousel picture, there was a tall clown in the background. The speed of the ride somewhat blurred his image, but I could see him just standing there, arms at his sides. In the Hall of Mirrors, the flash illuminated the face of a smiling clown in one mirror in the corner of the picture. There was something chillingly twisted about his expression. How many times did I collide into him thinking it was my girlfriend? And lastly, There was the picture of me standing next to the shooting gallery prize rack. There he was next to the octopus I grabbed from my girlfriend. I thought he was a doll. The realization made me absolutely sick. I was a hair's length away from him. His warm breath probably grazed my skin. What sort of sick delight did he get from doing this? I called up my girlfriend, who was still asleep, and asked her if she knew the clowns that were hired for the carnival. Her reply made me shudder. They got rid of clowns 5 years ago when parents complained they were scaring the kids. Update: after this whole incident, my girlfriend quit her job at the carnival. We had a bonfire this November where she incinerated the stuffed octopus. She also pulled the album off of Facebook and deleted the pics from her phone. She said they disturbed her way too much. What she doesn't know is that I copied the pictures from Facebook and saved them to my hard drive. I'm thinking of posting them here, but part of me doesn't want to relive that night. Story 3. The worst wedding I've ever photographed. I've been a wedding photographer for nearly 10 years, and I thought I'd seen it all. Trashy, beautiful, tragic, hilarious, or just bizarre. I have stories. I have the typical groom getting caught getting it on with the maid of honor, family getting into brawls, brides ODNG in the bathroom, gay couples having no one attend their wedding, or worse, the one uninhibited homophobic relative crashing to just be a dick stories. But we aren't here for the typical stories. If we were, we'd be here all day. We're here for the wedding from last October. Fall weddings are probably my favorite. If I ever get married, I'll probably get hitched in the fall. It was the parents of the bride who came to me, asking for my services for a wedding in 2 weeks. Their original photographer apparently up and quit on them, and they were desperate to have their darling daughter's wedding immortalized in picture format. Luckily for them, I had a clear schedule. I did charge them quite a bit extra for the suddenness of it all, but judging by the father's Rolex, it wasn't that big a deal. One thing I'm good at guessing is the family's wealth status. And once again I was on point. The Searites were rolling in dough. Not that I really liked them, though. I'm not required to like all my clients, although it does make things a bit more relaxing. Harold Searite absolutely leered at my chest whenever he thought I wasn't looking, and Carol was clearly the trophy wife that was over the hill. I've never seen a human being that genuinely looked more like plastic than her. Nothing wrong with plastic surgery or Botox, but there's got to be a cutoff at some point. I think I should have been more off put by the parents coming to me rather than the bride, but I just figured said bride was busy with other wedding planning shit and didn't think too hard on it. Day came, and oh boy, I realized I was getting into something I didn't want to be a part of right away. First time I saw the bride, Tanya, I had a brief moment of, I don't know how old this girl is. She could have been 16. She could have been just 18. Definitely not over 20, though. I've seen young marriages when it's a shotgun affair, but then I met the groom, Marcel Wingate, who was definitely no younger than 30. And Marcel was just, something felt off. The man was a giant for one. He towered over me, let alone Tanya. With his long, pale face and sunken eyes, he could have been fucking Lurch from the Addams Family. When he shook my hand and introduced himself, I barely repressed a shiver. But years of practice helped me to smile and act like there wasn't something slimy about all of this. Tanya never said a word when she was made over for her big day. Only Carol did, chirping and twittering about, how about you make her hair a little bigger, or make her eyes pop? She has such pretty eyelashes. Luckily, Carol had to go have a smoke every 15 minutes, so the makeup and hair people could have a moment to actually work. By the time it was all over, Tanya looked perfect. Her dress was basically a white ball gown. A tiara was placed in her strawberry blonde hair, cheeks blushing a perfect pink. But unlike most brides, she still hadn't said a word, and those weren't sure as hell tears of joy she was holding back. I'm sure you've heard about the first look photo fad. I find it great to get that perfect expression a groom makes when he sees the bride in her dress for the first time. It's usually quite cute. This was the first time I shot a first look photo where I truly believe it was the first time the bride and groom have actually looked at each other. Marcel did seem to have his breath taken away by his lovely bride, but her expression was less than thrilled as he took her hand and gave it a tight squeeze. My stomach turned when he leaned in for a kiss on the cheek, and she quite obviously flinched. It's time I put a pin on the myth that arranged marriages only happen in foreign countries, and only people from certain cultures take part in it. They happen all the time in the U.S., and more often than not it's an old man who wants a virgin bride, and by virgin I mean still in fucking high school. This wouldn't even be the first one I was hired to photograph. I managed to catch Tanya alone in the room she got ready in, sitting next to the open window and twirling an unlit cigarette between her fingers. Need a light? I offered as I came in. No thanks. I don't smoke, but they say it makes you feel better, right? She said, looking up at me with those doll-like blue eyes. It also gives you lung and throat cancer. I took the cigarette from her and lit it up for myself, but I'm a bad example, so do as I say, not as I do. Now that got a smile out of her, even if it only lasted a second. How often do you smoke? She asked. Depends on the day. Usually I have 2 or 3. Bad day I can have a few more. I lowered the cigarette and looked down at her. How old are you, Tanya? 19. 20 in a few weeks. I have a bit of a baby face. She poked one of her cheeks. Why do you care? I glanced at the door to make sure Carol wasn't going to barge in. Tanya, are you not okay with this? The wedding? I asked quietly. Tanya's eyes widened. Damn, you're good. She also glanced at the door. Harold, my stepdad, arranged all of this. If he had it his way, it would have happened when I was 15, but Marcel kept delaying. Business, apparently. He tried to delay another year, but my dad implied he had other offers. She shivered and wrapped her arms around herself. If I said no, Harold would kick me out and cut me off, froze on my bank account. I'd have nothing and no one, and I don't know what I'd do if that happened. I reached into my purse and pulled out one of my business cards, flipped a card over. It has a number for a woman's shelter. They specialize in helping women escape from dangerous home situations. Hides them, helps them get started in a new city if need be. Below that is my personal home number, if you just need to talk, okay. Tanya took the card and clung onto it tightly before tucking it into her bra. You might be the nicest person I've ever met, she murmured. I gave her shoulder a squeeze. I try, I said before extinguishing the cigarette on the windowsill. If you need to escape any time tonight, just ask me to help you go to the bathroom. We can pull a whole runaway bride. I joked. That got another laugh out of her, just in time for her mom to pop into the room. Well, what's taking so long? Hurry up, the wedding's going to be starting in 15 minutes, and I don't want you to cry and make your face all blotchy and ugly. She whined. Tanya's brief joy faded, and she gave me one more sad look before following her mother out. The ceremony would have been so much more beautiful if I didn't know the dirty little secret behind it all. Tanya didn't smile once. I don't think even one of those bridesmaids was an actual friend of hers, or at least not a sincere one. When the priest said, "You may kiss the bride," Tanya let one tear slip down her cheek when Marcel leaned down to kiss her. I was seriously considering calling the cops, but what could they do? Tanya would likely cave and say nothing was wrong, and since she wasn't a minor, they couldn't label Marcel a pedo and her stepfather a child seller. It still didn't make the situation any less shitty. All I could do was snap pictures of the worst day of Tanya's life. At the reception, I was constantly being nagged by Carol about what pictures to take to the point where I wanted to rip her hair out. But I did notice something different about the first dance between the couple. Tanya at first was stiff as a board, reluctant to even touch Marcel, but he leaned down and whispered something in her ear. Her entire demeanor changed in a blink of an eye to one of surprise, and I managed to read her lips. Really? Marcel nodded, and I managed to catch a picture of the first smile Tanya had since she said "I do." By the end of the dance, she was actually starting to get into it, resting her head on his chest as they swayed to 1,000 years. It was a complete 180 change. Tanya was now one of the happiest, and dare I say it, flirtiest brides I've ever seen. She even leaned up to kiss him on the cheek as they sat down, something that took even Marcel by surprise judging by how he blushed. I genuinely started to wonder if Marcel slipped something in her drink to get her acting so happy when Carol started to nag me again about where her husband was. She was the kind of mother who forgot this was her child's wedding instead of her own, and she wanted pictures of her and Harold. In order to get the fuck away from her, I told her I'd go find him. He'd been hitting the open bar a little hard that night. I assumed he was in the bathroom either throwing up or cheating on his wife. It could have gone either way at that point. When I approached the men's room, I heard something that sounded like gargling or swallowing. EW, I know, but I kinda hoped to ruin this nasty bitch's day if her husband really was cheating, so I opened the bathroom door with my camera at the ready. I made eye contact with Harold. Or rather, I made eye contact with Harold's head. It was sitting in the sink, expression twisted in abject horror. The room was soaked in blood, body parts strewn around the floor. Meanwhile, Marcel had stripped out of his tuxedo and was currently swallowing Harold's arm. Whole. Now I was wondering if I'd had something slipped into my champagne. Humans can't just unhinge their jaw like that. Each gulp taking Marcel's arm deeper down his throat. I saw the tips of Harold's fingers disappear with small wave of goodbye. And then I dropped my camera. Yes, I heard something break. No, I didn't care. I just saw the groom eat the goddamn father of the bride. Marcel's head shot up in his eyes. Before now, they were a dull, watery gray, but now they were mottled brown and red with slitted pupils. I felt frozen when those eyes looked at me. Oh, I'm terribly sorry one moment. Marcel turned to the sink that was free of a man's head and vomited. I heard several things clatter on the porcelain before he fetched them out and washed them off. With an embarrassed clearing of his throat, he walked up to me and pulled me into the bathroom. I thought I was dead, but instead Marcel placed several diamonds in my palm. For the camera, I didn't mean to startle you, he said. Uh-huh. I managed to get out as I stared at the literal handful of diamonds. This would pay for more than the camera. Why did you dash? Devour Harold? Oh, I've wanted to do that for years. Marcel chuckled as he grabbed some paper towels to wipe off his chin, like that would take away from the fact he was still naked and bloody in front of me. A terrible person actually tastes quite divine. You would taste absolutely terrible. It'd be like swallowing nails. Meanwhile, a man who offers his own daughter as a sacrificial lamb to something he knows eats humans, he tastes like the richest cut of steak, cooked medium rare and seasoned to perfection. Jesus Christ, this twisted situation had taken on a whole new level of fucked up. Wait, he seriously dashed. Oh, absolutely, Marcel snorted. And he'd do it again. All for what happens when my stomach processes human bone. I clutched the diamonds. You're not going to hurt Tanya? I asked. Marcel shook his head vigorously. God, no. I kept delaying the wedding in hopes that she'd manage to find a way out. But I think Harold was getting bored with my cold feet. There would be plenty of other people willing to pay for her, even if my payment would be easily thrice what others would offer. God, I was starting to feel a little dizzy. Here I was, talking to a human-eating groom. I glanced out the door, and a horrible idea entered my brain, one that would surely earn Marcel's good favor and help out Tanya. So if I told Carol, she could find her husband in the men's room. I asked. Marcel seemed puzzled for a second, but caught on quickly. With a nod, he picked up the head and tossed it into one of the stalls. I heard it splash in one of the toilets, and I almost started giggling. I was nearing hysteria. Go right ahead. I'll be waiting, he said as he kicked more limbs out of sight. I almost left when I had to ask one more question. What the hell are you? Marcel cocked his head to the side before he changed, just for a second. One moment he was a blood-soaked man, absolutely horrifying but normal. The next he was a snake, sort of. His body was gone, replaced by the body of an anaconda. But his head was still the same, minus the flick of a slim, forked tongue from his mouth. Then he was back to normal. He responded with a shrug. Funnily enough, I was hoping you'd tell me. I don't have a clue. I left the bathroom and bumped into Carol almost immediately in the hallway. Well, where's he? She snapped. I just pointed a thumb towards the bathroom. Think he's not feeling so well, I said before I was nearly bowled over by the grumpy bitch. I watched long enough for her to open the door and for a scaled tail to shoot out, snag her around the arm, and drag her into the bathroom before I headed back to the wedding. The problem seemed to solve itself that night. Marcel came back. The men's room locked after apparently someone got quite sick in there. Tanya no longer had to behave a certain way to please her mom, and I think she had a good night. I used my backup camera to make sure to get all the pictures of her smiling. Carol and Harold vanished into thin air, never to be seen or heard from again, and those diamonds paid for quite the nice new camera. Like I said, it's been a year. I sure as hell haven't forgotten that wedding. But what prompted me to share it was that I got a friend request from Tanya on Facebook. I normally don't accept friend requests from previous clients, but this one time I chose to make an exception. She does look so much better. She's going to college. She now sculpts and paints. She regularly volunteers at the woman's shelter I directed her to when we first met. And every Friday night is group date night at the local arcade with some of Marcel's friends that now appear to be her friends as well. Apparently Marcel is quite the dance revolution master, but is terrible at shooting games. Her most recent picture was her and Marcel smiling, and she was holding up an ultrasound picture.